also I would like to touch briefly on the term adrenal fatigue, which is often connected to stress, which was coined by James Wilson in 1998. And since it's become like a very widespread concept in alternative and functional medicine. And basically, what he was saying that prolonged stress drains the adrenals and leads to a low cortisol state in general. What do you think about his theory?
I'm not that well familiar with it, but I mean, what I've seen it when we do experiments, and of course, what happens if you are under long-term stress, like when we do experiments on animals, if we have a dominance hierarchy and the most subordinate animals, the ones that are at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy, they are in this really tough situation where they're constantly stressed and they have absolutely no control, and they just, the dominant can attack them whenever he wants, and they will never get access to any food or mates. Or there we see it sometimes that, I mean, their adrenal, they can't really respond to another stressor. They can't get an increase. So glucocorticoid levels actually decline instead, and they can't respond to another challenge. And we've studied that in fish, for instance, and then you get the percentage of these really stressed animals that, not all of them, but there is a certain percentage that turn out like that they can't. So that's probably an exhaustion of. And what also happens, probably happens much earlier, is that the feedback response, normally glucocorticoids are controlled very tightly by a negative feedback up to the pituitary and hypothalamus. And that breaks down if you are constantly on a very high glucocorticoid level. And that gives this unhealthy stress response. You get the difficulties to increase the glucocorticoids, but you also have a big difficulties to get them down when the stress disappears. So eventually you end up with a maybe lower glucocorticoid level, but you can't get it up and you can't get it down.
Right. So do you think that, basically, to sum it up, your answer to this question is that you do think that there is some validity, or at least to this theory, for sure? Yes. So basically, this can manifest in a lot of people. A lot of people further maintain, especially in functional medicine and different areas of different types of medicine, medical areas, that fatigue can be a manifestation of exhaustion, of stress, which is basically an energy deficit in the body. And how can this disrupt homeostasis further once the person is in this state?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in that kind of state, you will become, I guess, very passive, you will have, we talked about previously that these systems are important for driving other kinds of behaviors. You need to mobilize energy. And of course, if you're in that kind of state, you can't really do that, because you can't activate these systems in the same way. And then you can't mobilize the energy, so you will be very passive, I would say.
And that's just the first outer manifestation, but later on, that there is so it will be difficult to return to the homeostasis if the situation carries on, correct? And also, I would assume that from this state, this will only have negative consequences in the future for all sorts of other parts of the body involved, because of course the body is a whole. We cannot just take out one part and say this is wrong and everything else is fine, right?
No, I mean, it's a catabolic response to start with, the stress response. So all your anabolic, I mean, all the build-up, all the repair of your body, tissue growth and so on, will be compromised, of course. So which could lead to a lot of serious conditions and disrupt your homeostasis, of course.
And I'm kind of interested in the mitochondria per se. how would do you think there is an important role that they play in this? Because of course they are our energy suppliers, as it were, right? So there has to be some kind of a mitochondrial dysfunction associated with this kind of condition, don't you think?
I don't know really, but what I think is happening at the mitochondrial level is that, I mean, stress, then you mobilize your energy systems. So you start to utilize oxygen at a higher level. And oxygen, I mean, it's a problem. It's toxic. You get free radicals from oxygen. We're normally quite good at taking care of that. But of course, the more you speed up this system, the more free radicals you will generate. And they could, of course, damage your macromolecules like DNA or proteins and so on, and have lots of negative consequences.
And of course, if all this is speeded up, like you said, with stress, all the generation of oxygen and the energy supply, then I suppose because the digestive system is somehow shut down a little bit, the elimination doesn't work as well either. So I would suppose then that the accumulation of free radicals, like you say, which then are staying in the body, and we are not able to eliminate them as fast as we normally would, right? I mean, is that a possibility?
No, I mean, they don't have that long life. I mean, they are very reactive. So but of course, if you generate them to a high level, I don't think they would. You will get more damage, of course, from them. Normally, we have systems that very rapidly take care of the free radicals, even though we always have this problem. But definitely, it will increase the higher metabolic rate you have, and stress will increase your metabolic rate. That's true.
And therein comes exercise, for example, because a lot of people cope with stress through exercise, right? And then, so
the good thing with exercise is a bit strange at first if you start to think about it, because what you do when you get out to run or something, then you increase your metabolic rate, so you actually generate more free radicals.
Okay.
But the good thing with it, I mean, you don't run for 24 hours a day, at least not most of us. So you do it for a quite short time of the day anyway, and then your heart gets so much stronger, and your respiratory organs and the rest of your body, so your heart rate and so on during the rest of these 24 hours are actually much lower than it would have been if you didn't do the exercise. So you get you get a lot of good effects from exercise. So I think when it comes to exercise, you should not be so afraid of those free radicals. I think we can manage that. It's better to go out and do the jogging.
How can we measure our stress at home or our stress response at home? Are there any reliable ways?
That's difficult, very difficult. I know about its heart rate variability that's been suggested.
What do you think of that measurement tool?
I mean that of course tells you something about the control of the sympathetic parasympathetic system then, but if that tells you so much about your stress responsiveness, I don't know. And I mean, stress responsiveness, stress resilience, I mean, as we are different personalities, we will have different kind of stress responses. I don't think there is so much we can do about that. And to measure that, I mean, I remember one project I was involved in many years ago. That was an EU project actually supported by the European Union. We were trying to select rainbow trout for being stress resilient. Or a colleague of mine, Tom Pottinger in Britain, was selecting these fish, and he generated two strains, one that responded very little to stress with cortisol and one that responded with a lot of cortisol. And the one with lower cortisol was then said to be stress resilient, so they could stand, which was true in one case because they didn't get high cortisol. But when we look at these personality types, the type of personality that gets low cortisol generally gets high adrenaline instead, and the opposite. So when we took these fish and challenged them by a very acute, tough stress, there was actually more of these so-called stress resilient fish that really, they died from it because they get so high adrenaline, so they couldn't So I mean, it all depends on what you mean by stress and what kind of situation. So I think it's very hard to really measure something and say that this animal is more stress resilient than. What is of course important is that you have the environment you're living in, that you have an opportunity for coping mechanisms. You can get an outlet of frustration, which is actually a very stress dampening thing. That's a bit cruel or very cruel, but if you look at animals, I mean, one of the best things if you have a stress is to beat up someone that doesn't attack. Yes. And that may explain some, I mean, I don't think we humans are so different. We do that too, and that creates a lot of bad situations in our society, like violence against women and children and so on, which could be related to, it's no excuse of course, but the mechanism behind could be related to.
Now they say, during this period of COVID-19 and a lot of lockdowns in a lot of countries where people couldn't go very far, this escalated also, violence against women and children in the homes, because of course there's no outlet for the frustration and stress to take place. And
so that's probably that kind of mechanism that we see when we do the animal studies, that to hit someone that can't hit you back, that's a really effective coping strategy.
Right.
But I mean, to have a rich environment, not hitting anyone, but to have a rich environment is probably a good coping mechanism. And as we talked about, exercise is also.
Would come to your mind to cope, to be able to cope, to help people cope with stress?
I mean, the best exercise, I think, is one of the really good things, aerobic exercise. I mean, like running, swimming, or just long walks or something. That is an effective coping strategy.